Right before we jump into this video, I would like to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations. All you need to do is head on over to the website, just look for this orange box, put your name, email address in it, and I will send you that free guide. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a head-to-head comparison between the Sony A9 II and the Canon 1DX Mark III. Now you may be asking yourself, where is the Nikon D6? Nikon, are you there? Where's the D6? Well, at the time of recording this, it is delayed and not currently out, so that's why it's not here. And I'm putting both of these up head to head with the specs, but I do want to remind you that I've done a real-world review of the 1DX Mark III. I've done hands-on shooting with the A9 II, but did do a real-world review of the A9 original, which for all intent and purposes has the same exact guts in the A9 II that the A9 I had. You can check out the links to those real-world reviews down below, as well as other videos that I've already done on the A9 II. You can also download sample RAW files from both of these cameras so that you can pixel peep them to decide whether you like this one or you like that one, or you don't want either of them at all. But the point of this video is to put them head to head with the specs and then share my real world experiences of using them to help you decide which one might be the right one for you. Let's start off the specs with the image sensors inside of these cameras. The A9 II has a 24.2 megapixel full frame stacked CMOS sensor. The 1DX Mark III has a 20.1 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor with a newly designed low pass filter. Now this sensor in the A9 II is the same sensor that was in the A9 I, so we're about 3 years old on that one. Now this is a brand new camera, the 1DX Mark III. We don't know how old the sensor is because we don't know if they've been working on it for years. They probably have, but in terms of this camera being out, it's barely out into the world because there's some shortages at the time of recording this, but it's brand new. Now, this does not have a stacked sensor. Now, Sony says that the stacked sensor allows you to get less distortion when you are shooting with the electronic shutter. On the flip side, the 1DX Mark III doesn't have a stacked sensor, but it can shoot at 20 frames per second mechanical in live view mode. We'll get to that in just a minute. Do any of them get a check mark? At this point, I mean, is more technically better? Is the stacked sensor better? I can't decide on a check mark here, so nobody is getting a check mark. But if we're looking at just resolution, maybe in this situation the 24 is better, so let's give the Sony 8.4 of a check mark. Moving on to the next spec, which is image processor. The Sony has the Bionz X image processor, whereas the Canon has a Digic 10, not to be confused with an X, even though 10 and X kind of look exactly the same when they're Roman numerals. It has that image processor that's 3.1 times faster than the predecessor in the DSLR, which was the 1DX Mark II. Now, this is another thing that is very difficult to tell you which one is better. What I can tell you from the Sony side is that there's no problem with focus tracking, with the perception of seeing that focus box move without lagging behind. Whereas with something like an EOS R, which is a mirrorless camera, you see the lagging behind as the processor tries and keeps up. Now, this is not a mirrorless camera. Clearly, this is a DSLR, which I should have probably mentioned at the forefront, is that this is a DSLR and this is a mirrorless camera. I'll explain that more in just a second, but let's finish up the specs for this particular side. There is no lag time when you shoot this as a mirrorless camera. When it's tracking the autofocus box has zero lag. So the processing power in this camera, I think, is possibly more powerful than the one in the Sony. And we're just gonna say, based on size, you're gonna have a bigger processor in this bad boy, or put more in there in the future. But I still can't give anybody a check mark because this is something you just can't compare. Now would be a good time to talk about the mirrorless versus DSLR. Why am I putting those two cameras, or these two cameras, up against each other when one is clearly a mirrorless camera and one is a DSLR? The reason is this 1DX Mark III masquerades as a mirrorless camera. It's a DSLR, but all you need to do is do this. Oh, I am a mirrorless camera now. Right, just without an electronic viewfinder, which we'll talk more about in the future. But I think it was important to talk about it, that these cameras are the flagships from Sony and Canon, and that's why they're sitting here. Moving on to native ISO, we've got the Sony with 100 to 51,200, expandable to 204,800, whereas on the Canon side, it's 100 to 102,400 natively, expandable up to Swiss cheese mode of 819,200. You've got one extra stop here on the Canon. They both shoot very similarly. If you go beyond 51,200, I've never gone to 51,200 in any of my shoots in real world situations. In this case, Canon is talking about how they've gotten one stop better from their prior camera, the 1DX Mark II, which means that in the 1DX Mark II, 6400 ISO is 12,800 ISO quality in this camera. I'm going to tentatively give a check mark over here on the Canon side. This is a tentative one, Dan, so just have it, sneak onto the screen slowly because it's kind of tentative. The reason I say that is that this is more of a newer sensor, and I just feel that because it has that extra stop in its native range, that it is possibly slightly, ever so slightly better. Now for reference, let's look at these two images on the screen. You've got the Sony at high ISO, you have the Canon at high ISO. We tested it out at 6400, 12,800, and 25,600. You can download those sample DNG RAW files so you can pixel peep them. It was very difficult to really see much of a difference. Now, of course, one is 20 megapixels and the other is 24, but it was very subtle when you're looking at them one-to-one to see which one was ever so slightly better. It's possible when you look close enough at the highest of ISOs that we tested that the Canon may have eked it out. But that's if you're looking super hard. So that's why it has a tentative check mark. Moving on to frame rate. Now when the Sony A9 original came out and it did 20 frames a second in silent mode, we were like, our minds were blown. And then we realized that 20 frames per second silent, in order to shoot in that mode, you're shooting compressed RAW. If you want to shoot uncompressed RAW, you're getting 12 frames a second. Now that's silent. It will do 10 frames a second now in this camera in mechanical shutter mode. But on Canon's side, you could shoot 16 frames a second as a DSLR. You can shoot 20 frames a second in mirrorless mode in both, get this, silent shooting, 20 frames per second, as well as mechanical shutter at 20 frames per second. To give you a little sound of what that's like at 20 frames per second, pop the mirror up. Here we go. Oh my Jesus. OM Jesus. Is that what OMG stands for, Stephen? OM Jesus? Something like that. Yes, with the mechanical shutter. Why is that important? Well, one, it's shooting with the mechanical shutter and it's not compressing the RAW file. You're still getting the same RAW file. If you don't need to be silent, you can shoot with the mechanical shutter all the time and you don't really have to worry about distortion. You don't have to worry as much about flicker, because let's look at these images from the A9 II and the 1DX Mark III shooting basketball, actually just shooting the LCD sign just to see what the flicker rate looks like, because what you're actually seeing is not technically banding, it's not a camera issue, it's the flicker of the LED lights, and that's what it looks like when you shoot with the silent shutters with both of these cameras. But when you flick back into the mechanical shutter mode with the Canon, you don't have that banding or that flickering effect at all. So that is a major deal, that this shoots 20 frames a second mechanical and silent. This just does 20 in silent and then dumps it down to compressed RAW. And then if you need to go to mechanical, it's only 10 frames a second. So I'm gonna go ahead and give 20, count them, 20 check marks to the 1DX Mark III. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know that the images that you're seeing on the screen right now were taken with both of these cameras and edited using FroPack 2. If you're looking to speed up your RAW workflow or give yourself a great starting point, we created 15 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack2. Over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick up FroPack 2 right now, they are currently on sale at a discounted price. Or if you'd like to get FroPack 1 and FroPack 2 together, you can get the FroPack bundle and save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Moving on to focus points. The Sony has 693-point phase detect autofocus system, whereas the 1DX Mark III in DSLR mode has a 191-point AF system with 155 of those being cross type. Yeah, that's all clumped in the middle because DSLRs are old and that's what they do. They just put focusing points here instead of all the way across. I'm still not sure why it's always been limited to that, but it's always been limited right into the middle clump. But when you go into the mirrorless mode, when you flip it up out of the way, you have 525 autofocusing points when you're in live view. So which one of these cameras has a better autofocusing system? Now this is super interesting. Let's just put both of these side by side as it pertains to shooting them in mirrorless mode, meaning this is always in mirrorless mode and this is with the mirror flipped out of the way, not being a DSLR. I shot in real world situations where we put these head to head to photograph a dance team girl that goes to Temple University so that you can see the autofocusing points bouncing around the screen, where it locks onto the subject's face, where it goes to a pom-pom, where it shifts around when the dance team is dancing. They both were very similar when shooting basketball as well as other fast action. I do think that the Sony still has an edge over stickiness onto the subjects, meaning it acquires the face, it acquires the eye, and it stays there longer, and whereas the Canon bounces around when it's in mirrorless mode just a little more. I still feel more confident using the A9 II and its autofocus system than this flipped up with the mirror out of the way. But I will say that it was very interesting shooting this as a mirrorless camera. Now, some people may say, were you just holding the camera out like this? And the truth of the matter is, no. What I had to do was attach something like this. And by something like this, I really mean this. This is a Hoodman hood loop thing system that I got probably 8 years ago to use when shooting video on a DSLR. This allows me to just pop it into the hot shoe, use this little magnify thing, the loop, to see the back of the screen, and allows me to shoot more like a traditional photographer holding it up to your face. It's much easier to hold up the A9 II because it has an electronic viewfinder, but this does turn this camera into a usable mirrorless camera. What is interesting is how we had to shoot these cameras in order to allow you to see the boxes, the focus boxes moving. We had to attach Atomos recorders to the video outs of these cameras, and then we don't have an electronic viewfinder to use or the back of the screen here because the video out overrides that. So we literally had to hold the cameras out and try to shoot that way and keep it as stable as possible. It wasn't easy, but we wanted to do it so we could give you the best side-by-side comparisons in the real world. So at the end of the day, who's getting the check mark? Who's getting the check mark, everybody? Sony is still getting the check mark in autofocus right now. It's just easier to shoot with the mirrorless camera without having to use this attachment to the back of it to make it a mirrorless camera. And I do just think that the IAF is more responsive. I do think the lock-on tracking is still more responsive here, but it's very interesting what Canon has been able to do, but check mark goes to Sony. Now let's talk about max shutter speeds inside of these cameras. Now this comes in handy and comes into play if you're shooting outside, say using a 35 1.2 Sigma and photographing little Daniel in the side yard here at the factory and having to go to faster shutter speeds so I can shoot at 1.2. Yeah. Because the A9 II lets you go to 1/32,000th of a second electronically and 1/8,000th of a second mechanical, which is normal for flagships on the mechanical side. And on the 1DX Mark III side, it tops out at 1/8,000th of a second. it is really nice to have the capability of having a shutter go past 1/8,000th of a second when you are shooting at 1.2 outside at base ISO without having any kind of filter to cut down on light, any ND filter in front of the camera. It is fantastic to be able to do that. So a check mark goes over here on the Sony side. What are the burst rates of these cameras for people who like to spray and pray? And by spray and pray, I merely mean like this. Oh, I'm gonna get a good photo. Oh, there's a good photo. I'm praying that a good photo turns out. Anyway, on the Sony side, you get 239 frames in a row raw before you fill up that buffer and you can't shoot. On the Canon side, you get this many photos in raw. This is infinite. Infinite. Meaning you can hold your finger on the button at 20 frames per second and never outrun the buffer in this camera. Now look on the screen right now. You are seeing how long it takes to write to the Sony's cards. Forever. We did the test. We held the shutter down. We took a ton of pictures with the Canon. That's done instantly. We held the shutter down with the Sony, and it's still counting down from 60 all the way to 0. And the reason is the card slots in these cameras. I'm going to talk about the cards in a second, but I want to just give infinite number of check marks to the Canon, which is going to look funny on the screen, but yeah, infinite amount of check marks because you never will outrun this camera no matter what you do shooting RAW or anything else, even if you shoot RAW plus HEIF. Since we just talked about how many shots in a row you can get, the Sony has 2 updated UHS-2 SD card slots. Yes, SD card slots. You know that SD card thing that's been around a long time? And the Canon has dual CF Express cards. Now, if you aren't familiar with what CF Express cards are, they are very similar to XQD cards. They are the same form factor. They are just 8 billion times faster. Not actually 8 billion times faster. They are blazing fast. They are so fast at receiving data and transferring data to the computer when you're done, when you have the right card reader. Personally, if anybody has a 1DX or CF Express cards, we are using the card reader from ProGrade Digital, because it works super fast. We also have ProGrade CF Express cards as well as Sony Tough cards to go into this camera. This is one of the reasons why I made that video a warning to Sony, because they need to be able to squeeze CF Express cards into their future cameras. This camera is massive. You can get 2 CF Express cards in it. It's rumored that the EOS R5 will have 2 card slots, but one of them will be CF Express and the other will be SD, which means you've got to dumb down your write speed to the dumbest card and slowest card in the camera. That will inhibit your ability to shoot much faster. Now, I'm not always saying that you need to spray and pray. The whole point of being able to shoot lots of frames per second is that you get those quick bursts so you can pick the decisive moment out of there. But check marks, we're going to go with 2 check marks over the 1DX Mark III for 2 CF Express cards. I am not a crook. I am not a crook. Now, I know I said earlier that I'd explain a little deeper what the difference is between a mirrorless camera, what makes this mirrorless, what makes this a DSLR. Well, obviously this one has a mirror and this one doesn't, but more than that is that this has an electronic viewfinder, which we call an EVF. This is an optical viewfinder because there's a mirror. When the mirror flips out of the way, for all intent and purposes, this becomes a mirrorless camera without an electronic viewfinder. That's why I use this hood loop on the back to, in essence, turn the 3.2-inch touchscreen, which no longer can be touched because this is in front of it, into an electronic viewfinder. Now, if you want to go deeper into the differences between mirrorless and DSLR, we have a really good video that is linked down below that you can watch to learn the differences between mirrorless and DSLR. But check marks go to Sony for having the electronic viewfinder in this camera. I do want it to be a better electronic viewfinder in the future. It's not as good as what's in the A7R4, but it isn't bad at all. I would just like to see more resolution and a better refresh rate in the future. Now that we've talked about EVFs, let's talk about the touchscreens on the back of these cameras. The Sony has a 3-inch, 1.4 million crappy dot tilting touchscreen, but it has limiting touch focus capabilities, limiting touch. You can't even touch the menu. So you're on the menu and you're like, oh, I want to select this. You can't. And to be honest with you, because of my nose, I turn off the touch functions for moving focusing points because my nose will shoot the focusing point to a corner where I don't want it. I actually was on a shoot and I'm like, why is my focus point moving automatically? My schnoz, this thing right here. My schnoz was moving points. Now, on the Canon side, you have a 3.2-inch, 2.1 million dot touchscreen, but it's fixed. It doesn't move. I don't really care too much that the Sony can flip out. That's not that big of a deal. It doesn't rotate. I know some people want one that flips out to the side, but I guess having the option of it to flip down a little bit may come in handy for those times where you need to shoot over a crowd or want to get down low. I can see the benefit in that, but the Canon does not have it. So we'll give like a check mark for the movability of the screen on the Sony side, but a double check mark, a triple check mark, that's right, 3 of them on the Canon side because it is a much higher resolution and fully active touchscreen, meaning you can touch all of the menus, touch the focusing points, touch what you want to touch other than other people, because that would get you hashtagged without permission. You need permission, but then it also does not allow you to touch screen when this is in the way. But still, 3 check marks over here. Let me jump in here and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, use what I use for jaredpolin.com. I use it because I don't need to know coding. It's plug and play, and you can be up in less than 30 minutes with a really good-looking professional website. To get a 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto, and if you decide that it works for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now we're on to body features. These are pecs. No, sorry. These are pecs, and these are biceps. These are triceps. Not those body features, Jared. They're talking about the cameras. All right, so the A9 II has an all-new designed form factor. That means that the grip on the A9 II will work on the A7R4 and probably the future A7 IV whenever that is announced. Now, it also can become smaller when you take the grip off because the grip can be removed. This camera feels a hell of a lot better than it used to feel with this new design. Also, there's a million different buttons that you can map out and customize for all of the functions and features that you want to use without having to go into the menu. Because a lot of people complain that the menu of the Sonys sucks. Well, the menu isn't the greatest menu, but once you learn it and use it, it's not a big deal. Plus, you don't really need to go into the menu that often because you have all the features and functions right at your fingertips when you hit the FN button, or you've already set all of the buttons customized for you. Now, there is something I hate on top of this camera. That's the way that you change the shooting modes from high to medium to low to bracketing. I hate that there's a physical dial and you cannot override it in the system to say, oh, switch to continuous high. It's all done in the A9 II up top. You also do not have back illuminated buttons, which is something that the 1DX Mark III now has. It has back illuminated buttons, which matches the Nikon D850 as well as the D5, and I'm assuming the D6, when that gets here, will have back illuminated buttons as well. The 1DX is built like a brick shithouse. It is a massive feeling camera that is substantial, much bigger than the A9 II, which I actually love having the smaller camera these days, but I would prefer something in between both of these so that the Sony could allow me to have CF Express cards and feel a little bit more rugged and feel better in the hands. This one, the 1DX Mark III, is slightly lighter by 90 grams than the 1DX Mark II. It takes a larger battery than the Sony takes, so you're going to get more battery life on this side just for the sheer fact that the battery is larger, but you will get plenty of time out of these batteries. One of the main contentions that people had with mirrorless cameras is that the batteries don't last. They do last now, so that is a null and void point. It's moot, it's gone. The battery life on both of these are great. On the back of this 1DX Mark III, there is a smart controller. It's so much better than anything out on the market from anybody else. All you need to do is activate it, And you actually have to find it in the custom menu setting, which I didn't even know where to look for it. You have to dig deep and change multiple things to activate it. Canon did not make that easy. Hopefully Canon does make that easy. Speaking of confusing menu systems, trying to find that was a bitch. I think I had to call somebody, and then I ended up finding it myself after like 20 minutes of looking. No, I reached out to somebody, and they still didn't know the answer. I had to find it myself, but I did. But what I love about it is that you can quickly move the focusing points by simply moving your finger over the sensor. It moves, it works really well. And on the Sony side, you have to slide your finger along the screen. But like I said, my nose keeps getting in the way, so it's not as good. You have a joystick for moving the focusing points, which is slower than using this touch-sensitive bar. In terms of in-body image stabilization, the A9 II has IBIS. Yay! The Canon does not have IBIS. Boo! It is what it is in a DSLR. No Canon camera has IBIS at the time of recording this. Which camera do I prefer to hold and which features do I like? Well, I like the customizability of the Sony. I've gotten really used to where all of the buttons are at this point. They're just in the right place, that when I start using some of these other cameras, I've got to dig deeper by using the touchscreen, and I've got to move this and I got to move that. It's just much easier here. But I love the touch sensor for moving the focusing points. That is amazing and incredible. I love the feel and the build of this body. It's heavier, this is lighter. Nobody's getting a check mark because there's pros and cons to both of them. For those of you who like to shoot video with these cameras, let's talk about some of the video specs. Starting with the Sony, we've got full frame 8-bit 420 4K at up to 30 frames per second. You have 1080p up to 120 frames per second with audio, and there is no S-Log, and there are zebra lines. Now, I do want to point out that from the A9 I to the A9 II, actually it's not the A9 I, it's just the A9, there was no change. No change whatsoever. On the Canon side, the 1DX Mark III shoots full frame 12-bit 5.5K raw video internally at up to 24 frames per second, but with no autofocus. It has full frame 10-bit 422 4K at up to 60 frames per second with C-Log, no AF unless you crop in slightly, also 1080p at up to 120 frames per second with no audio, and there is no zebra lines, or there are no zebra lines. The features that you get inside of this Canon blow the A9 II out of the water in terms of video. Now, most people are not buying an A9 II to shoot video. Sony has other cameras that have very capable video features, but this is a super packed camera on the Canon side with a ton of great video features that are better than a lot of things they have on the market currently at the time of recording this. But let's talk about the autofocus. On the Sony side, you've got lock-on tracking, IAF, face detection, as well as animal detection. On the Canon side, you have dual pixel CMOS AF, lock-on tracking, IAF, face detection, and it's a Canon. Their dual pixel AF for video is super cinematic, super smooth. It's really good. Sony's is very good as well. It's hard to tell you which one is better when it comes to video autofocus. I do love the cinematic approach of how the Canon moves in and out when it comes to autofocus, but it's hard to tell you that one is better than the other. But overall, we are going to tell you which one is better, at least based on these specs. It's definitely the 1DX Mark III because it has a lot more video specs than the A9 II. As we get closer to the end, let's talk about weight. The Sony weighs in at 1.49 pounds, whereas the Canon weighs in at 3.17 pounds, aka 1,440 grams. It's heavy. It's like the Sony went on a diet and was like, here, I'm gonna be half the weight as you. Look, if you're a pro and you're throwing a big piece of glass on this, it's going to add up. It gets heavy. This is the first thing I said when I had a 70 to 200 on here, as well as the 11 to 24 at one point, is the fact that, wow, this is much heavier than when I have a 14 to 24 2.8 on the front of this camera, because the Sony is just so much lighter. In terms of weight, we're gonna give a check mark to Sony for doing a good job. Wait, actually, let's take that back. Sony did a good job losing weight, so they get a check mark. But then on the flip side, Canon must be working out a lot. That's why it's added the muscle. Yeah, So a thicker muscular check mark goes onto the Canon side, and a thinner, much thinner, daintier check mark goes onto the Sony side. Would you like to purchase either of these two cameras or any other camera gear for that matter? Well, if so, head on over to allenscamera.com to check out what they have to offer. You can buy new, you can buy used, and they are a mom and pop store that's been around for over 30 years, and that is where I make all of my purchases. The links are down below directly to these two cameras, and any purchases made help support this channel. Now, there's two really important tests left to see who gets the check mark, starting with the sniff test. Which one sniffs better? It smells like rotten eggs, actually. And it wasn't me. Baby wipes. Yeah. Definitely a check mark goes on to Canon. It smells so much better. Good job, Canon. And now, the all-important Windtunnel test. If you're new here, the Windtunnel test took a lot of time to develop. Many, many years of development to figure out who wins the Windtunnel test. Let me explain how it works. I take a step back, I breathe in, and I put it into the wind tunnel just like that. Because that is a very scientific method of doing a wind tunnel test right here at the factory. And the winner? Yeah, I don't know who won the wind tunnel test. You guys determine the wind tunnel test by giving a check mark down below in the comments right now. And finally, the last spec to talk about, the price. The Sony clocks in at $4,498 without the grip. It's going to cost you another $300 and so to add the grip, so you're looking at just around $5,000, a little less. And then on the Canon side, you're in at $6,499, which is a lot of money to spend on a camera. And so the moral of the story here is if we're putting them side by side and comparing them, which one, if you were looking to buy a camera today, would be the right choice? This is super tough because this is a dying breed. This is probably the last DSLR that Canon will ever make as a flagship camera. The highest end, we will not see that again because they are going to go all in, or already have, on the mirrorless world. So if you're buying this today and you're an action sports photojournalist type photographer, you work for a newspaper, you work for a magazine, somebody else is picking you up gear, this is a very good option because there's a ton of glass for EF mounts that you can get and they'll be fine. But just know that it's going to be obsoleted in the next couple years. It won't be fully obsoleted in the next couple years. Just know that it's going to start branching off into the RF mount as Canon grows into the mirrorless technology. You will see that. On the Sony side, you are getting into the Sony mirrorless world. It's less expensive. It's not built as well. It's not as weather sealed. This thing is going to take a beating more than this is going to take a beating, but it's less expensive. It's not as heavy. It has a lot of similar features, as you know from the check marks. There's pros and cons on both sides. If you're already invested in Sony, in the Sony world, you have an A7R4 and you want to add this to the bag for doing other silent shooting at 20 frames a second, dumbed down in the compressed mode, and you have the grip, you can put the grip on both cameras. Flick it back and forth from one to the other. This would be a very nice option if you're already in that world. If you're just starting out and you're looking to shoot sports, oh man, in the mirrorless world, the only way to go is the A9 II in a full mirrorless world. If you got a couple of extra bucks to spend and you don't mind getting EF glass that they no longer will end up making new EF lenses, and you have the money to spend $6,500, this as a mirrorless camera is capable. Not perfect, but extremely capable that I could use this in the real world. It'd be much more difficult on a campaign trail to carry this around because it's much heavier, and to rely on this instead of an electronic viewfinder. So I guess at the end of the day, I'm still going to have to lean on the mirrorless side of the world because this, being full mirrorless with an electronic viewfinder, is easier to shoot with right now. The future of Canon is bright, but right now, I think I gotta recommend the A9 II over the old school DSLR. And I honestly think what it really comes down to is the electronic viewfinder. If this had an electronic viewfinder, I would throw this. I would throw you over there because I would retire you to the shelf because you're not as good as this in certain features. You, don't cry. Don't cry. There's no crying at the Fro Factory. So really, taking all that into consideration, there's pros and cons on both sides. If this was a mirrorless camera, it would win the game all day long. Okay, that was a long comparison. Don't forget you can download the sample raw files. There's links down below to check out all of the other videos that we've done independently with these cameras. Oh, also, I've compared some of the autofocuses with them too. They're all down below. I want to thank you guys very much for watching. Leave questions, comments, and concerns down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And that is where I'm going to leave it. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.